What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be talking about the Winnipeg Jets and the possibility of some of their younger talent making an impact in this upcoming season. Obviously the Jets signed quite a few veterans heading into the year, but with Adam Lowry not starting, I think it does open the door to at least take a look at some of these younger players. Obviously, Adam Lowry will not start the season as he had, off-season surgery, hip surgery, so he's not going to be ready until, sounds like, November, December kind of timeline. So a big chunk of the season that Adam Lowry is going to miss, a big part of the Jets, especially down the middle. So I think that does open the door to at least take a look at some of these younger players that, played with the Moose, played with the Jets a little bit last year, that could be a potential fit, to cover for Adam Lowry. Jonathan Toews has been added to the Jets roster, and I think he's going to be given every opportunity to be the second line center, but if that doesn't work out, if his body isn't holding up, doesn't look like he can handle a second line role, I wouldn't be surprised if the Jets try a guy there like Braden Jagger. The former 14th overall pick in the 2023 draft put up a big year last year, split between the Warriors and the Hurricanes of the WHL, played 54 games, put up 82 points. He had a big year, including a very impressive playoff for the Hurricanes, 16 games played, 8 goals, 6 assists for 14 points. Braden Jagger is a guy that could definitely be looked at. He had a really strong camp last year, and I think if he has another one this year, he's a guy the Jets could definitely consider, definitely taking a look at. I don't know if he's necessarily a favorite to stay on the roster, but I think if he has a camp that says, hey, you know what, you can't send me down right now, you at least have to take a look, for a few games of NHL action, I think that could happen. And Jagger's a guy that I think is going to be a really good middle six center in the NHL. I think that he's got, strong top six upside. I don't think that he's going to be like a 90, 100 point player or anything like that, but I do think that there's a really good chance that he becomes just a really strong second line center. And I think that's a role that he could, even come into as early as this year if he's got the right guys around him. Do I think it's likely? Not so much. I don't think that, even if he makes the roster, it'll be a long-term stay there. I think they'll send him back down before, he passes that 9-game threshold and, loses a year of his entry-level contract. I think that's probably the most we'll see Braden Jagger this year, unless he's absolutely firing on all cylinders. But I just don't see it, with his age and with some of the other guys that are already in the system, have already seen NHL action, such as Lambert and Jipperov, which I'll get to later. But Jagger, definitely a very skilled player, a guy that I think could help this Jets lineup now. Will they go and, take that leap with them? We'll see, but I think it's more, probable that we see him go back to junior this season. Now, if we're going to be talking about guys that I think have way better chances of getting on the ice, Brad Lambert and Nikita Jipperov. This Jets lineup got old this past year. They lost Nikolaj Ehlers. They filled their holes with, Jonathan Toews. We'll see how he's able to perform at his age, being out of hockey for a while. And Gustav Nyquist, who's going to be 36 when the season starts. Both of those guys are projected to be in the top 6. This isn't necessarily a massive, great, grand top 6 that we were looking at just a season ago, and I do think that there is potential for this team to regress this season, especially in the speed department. You take a look at this team, all of a sudden, without Nick Ehlers, it turns a team that was already slow into a very slow team, right? Nikolaj Ehlers really helped mask that weakness for the Jets. And, I wouldn't necessarily say that they did a lot to, get quicker this year. I think the Jets are going to struggle with pace a little bit against some of those downhill teams like Colorado. But, we'll see what happens down the road here. But guys that I think could definitely help with this are Jipperov and Lambert. Now, Jipperov and Lambert last year were kind of put in a weird situation with the Moose, because the Moose were horrid. There was nobody on that team, and the guys that were on that team got called up to the Jets when injuries happened, right? So there wasn't a lot of, flow and, you know, ability to really find a role in the AHL. The way they were developing Brad Lambert last year was really weird. You know, he was playing up and down the lineup. You know, it was very rare that he'd be playing on the same line from start to finish at the end of every game. Got a lot of minutes, but, you know, his minutes were very wonky and weird, and he was playing a lot of roles and just being put in roles where maybe it wasn't, you know, the best for his development. But I wouldn't say that he did a bad job in the minutes that he played, and he even got some NHL action where I thought he looked really good. And if it weren't for him, you know, gripping the stick too much or some bad luck, I think he could have had, you know, 2 goals for sure, you know, in those 4 NHL games that he played. I thought that he looked really comfortable, and, you know, with a guy like Cole Perfetti on his line, I think that, you know, long term he could do some damage there. He has that game-breaking speed, and that would do a ton to this lineup in terms of quickness. Is he NHL ready? You know, we'll see. I think he's going to have a really good camp, but even if he goes down to the AHL to start the year with, you know, some of these studs that the Jets had signed, you know, to add to the Moose like Fajimo, you know, Cale Clegg, the Moose really loaded up. You know, they did a really good job getting some organizational depth in there to really help out that Moose team that was really, really terrible last year, really just relying on Lambert and Jipperov to carry the load completely, and maybe a role they weren't ready for yet. You know, if Lambert's able to go and just go crazy with some of those guys, with some players to actually help him develop, I think it could be really fun to watch. And, you know, maybe that turns into a mid-season call-up for him, maybe, you know, even sooner than that. But if he wants to make a name for himself early on, have a good camp, I think that there's room to step into the Jets' middle 6 here. I really do think there's room. But if the Jets say no, they send him back to the AHL, I think there's a very good chance that we see Brad Lambert before the end of this season for a large chunk of games. I think, you know, if there's an injury to the top 6, he's going to be in there, whether it's at center or wing. I think it's more likely that the Jets look at him as a winger despite the 4 games he played at center last season. You know, just given what they have right now, I think it's more likely that, at least for this year, that he would come in and play on the wing. But I would feel, you know, really good about Brad Lambert coming out in preseason looking, you know, like a player, you know, because the Jets desperately need that speed in their lineup, and it's just something they don't have right now. So Brad Lambert, I think, is actually the front runner to be on this Jets roster day 1. We'll see what happens, but if Brad Lambert could break out, it'd be a great time to do that. Now, Nikita Jipperov's a really interesting one because he had the most NHL success a year ago. Guy couldn't stop scoring in the games that he played. He did get sent down, and his year ended last year with some injury problems, right? Of course, missing the last half of the year in the AHL, wasn't able to be a black ace for the NHL team, you know, because of his leg injury. But, you know, looks like he's going to be ready for training camp. Looks like he's going to be out there. We'll see how he recovers from that leg injury. I don't think it's likely that he starts just because, you know, he is a winger. And if you look at the Jets lineup right now, I don't really see them putting him as like a 4th line winger spot. Maybe they do to start the year and then send him down again. But I don't see that being the case long term. I see him more as, you know, probably starting with the Moose, and kind of the same as Lambert. You know, if he starts with the Moose, they're gonna, you know, really just get him developing down there, get him scoring, playing with better players, you know, better situations surrounding him. And, you know, just go out there and go crazy in the AHL for a while. Maybe he's a mid-season call-up. You know, I really do see this year as a transitional year for the Jets. And, you know, if some of these younger players are able to dominate in the AHL early on, maybe they get the call, maybe they fill in positions, you know, with Adam Lowry, you know, starting the season on the bench, obviously with that surgery. You know, opportunity knocks for these guys, and I think they're going to be able to make a name for themselves early if they, you know, decide to do so. If they have a big camp, I think there's a spot for these guys, and, you know, that goes for all of them. So Nikita Jipperov, an electrifying, gritty, mean forward, I think that he could fill in. You know, the question is, will he be able to, you know, step into the lineup over a guy like Brad Lambert? I think there's going to be big competition in this top 6 this year and with these prospects, so we'll have to see how this all shakes out. But, you know, if one guy goes down in the Jets top 6, it's free game, right? You know, Brad Lambert, step on up. Nikita Jipperov, step on up. I think these two are going to get a lot of NHL action this year. We're going to find out a lot about these 2 prospects this year. But that is the video, guys. What do you guys think about the Jets prospects stepping into the lineup this year? Do you think that there's a pretty good chance they get some games, or do you think the Jets are going to ride with their vets until the end? I want to hear from you guys, but that's all I got today, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. As always, leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Go Jets go. Bye-bye.